Hello everyone, thank you for joining this educational webinars organized by Oncia community in collaboration with IBA. It's great to see familiar names and a warm welcome to the newcomers. So let me share the presentation. So my name is Françoise Vamek and I will be your host today. I'm the co-founder of Oncia Community, a foundation that supports integrative cancer care. As part of our mission, we organize educational webinars on quarterly basis in order to raise awareness and to share inspiring model of support. So today we will talk about the role of architectures in cancer support, and we will benefit from the experience of Maggie's. We are very delighted to welcome Jason Warren, Property Projects Lead at Maggie's. Good afternoon, Jason.
Good afternoon, Francois. Very pleased to be here.
Yeah, it's very great to have you with us today. Okay. So, but before we get started, let me give you a brief overview of Oncia Community missions. At Oncia Community, we are fully convinced that beyond technological and medical progresses, humanizing cancer care is also very essential. So not only targeting the disease, but also looking at the individuals in all the dimensions of health, physical, social, emotional. Our mission is simple and strong. So we want every people affected by cancer to have access to comprehensive cancer care. And healing environments are part of that approach. So our mission is to improve patient experience and health outcome. And for that, we partner with leading hospitals worldwide in order to create complementary cancer care centers. So we help hospitals to build full program of evidence-based therapy, meaning, for instance, physical activities, emotional support like yoga or mindfulness, nutrition counsels, social services, benefit services. But what makes a big difference is where this therapy takes place. So not in a hospital, but just near, close to the hospital, in a non-clinical environment, in a warm, in a welcoming spaces where people feel like at home. So this setting helps reduce fear, helps to reduce anxiety, restore calm, and this is clearly the Maggie's model of support. So let me show you as a flavor some example that illustrates the spirit of Maggie's centers. So you can see some buildings, some centers from Maggie's. These spaces are very inspiring. They work with renowned architects in order to create cocoon-like atmospheres, bringing safety and calm with a mix of architectures, nature, and art. So I will now give the floor to Jason Warren. He will explain you in more details what is the Maggie's model, so and what makes this space is so special and why it is not just a building. So Jason Warren is an architect and a project manager with experience in the UK, mainland Europe, and US. He has worked on a wide range of projects, from domestic one-off houses to large-scale developments. He has the opportunity to collaborate with famous and renowned architects, and he has also served on design advisory committees. So today, from 2 years, he works at Maggie's as property projects lead, where he oversees the creation of healing spaces across the UK. So I let the floor to Jason, and thank you so much to be here with us today.
Thank you so much, Francoise, and again, it's a pleasure to join you. And thank you for the opportunity for to allow me to come and have a chat with you and your viewers. I will share my screen if I can. So, thank you very much for that warm welcome and introduction, Francoise. I know one of my colleagues, Andrew Anderson, has previously given a webinar through this same forum and spoken more about the services that Maggie's provides in terms of the cancer support services. I'll try not to duplicate too much on what Andy has already spoken about, and I'll try to focus more on the architecture, but apologies if there is some repetition there. If you've not already seen Andy's presentation, I would definitely have a look at that. I understand it's available on the Oncia community website. So that image that you can see there is the first Maggie's Centre that was opened up in Edinburgh almost 3 decades ago. And that little insert you can see on the left-hand side is the front cover of Maggie's brief. And the brief hasn't really changed that much in the last 3 decades in terms of the spaces that we ask our architects and landscape architects to provide. The brief is available on our website, and anybody can download that. And if they do, one of the things that I suppose from an architectural point of view that people will realise when they look through it, that the tangible bit of the brief that actually talks about the name of rooms that we require and how big those rooms are actually makes up quite a small percentage of the brief. I think it may only be 1 page. And the rest of that document really talks about the way that we would like Maggie's to feel and the way we would like it to operate, which given the weight there, you can see there's multiple pages offered over to that comparison to the compared to the small amount that's the tangible numbers. And I think that's reflective of Maggie's approach. In terms of our centre sizes, we have 2 standard sizes, or 2 points that we sort of jump off from. One is the smallest one is a 350 square metre centre, and the larger one is a 425 square metre centre, and that really just depends on footfall for the hospital that we are putting a centre into. Having said those sizes, if there is a compelling argument that the design team put forward that particular location might warrant a slightly larger centre for whatever reason, then we're always open to having a discussion about that. This one is a centre up in Newcastle that's designed by Ted Cullinan Architects. And we've just recently extended this centre by almost another 100 square metres to provide some additional space. And this is, as you can see, one of the internal spaces. This is one of our flexible spaces that we use for a whole range of different sort of group gatherings and activities. The landscapes for this centre are absolutely stunning. And actually, if the camera were facing the other way, you'd be looking out through great big sliding doors into a wonderful landscape designed by Sarah Price. So talking there a little bit about Maggie's blueprint, and I'm not going to read from the slides on these slides, but what I think might be more interesting perhaps to the audience is a little bit about how we come to select our architects and landscape architects. Really, I guess we've been very lucky for the last circa almost 3 decades that an incredibly talented range of architects and landscape designers and design teams have been involved in our centres, and we continue to get approached by incredibly talented designers. In terms of, we do have not a list as such, but we do have on record numerous architects who would like to work with us. And when we do have a discussion with a new hospital that is either keen for us to have a presence there, or we're keen to have a presence there ourselves, is sometimes there is a discussion over the connection that the architect might have with that location, be it personal or geographically based from their office. Not that's not always the case, and you'll see from some of our centres. We've got New York architects designing centres in North London. Sometimes it always it will be that they can show evidence of passion for the project, and really understanding what a Maggie's needs to be. And I think the only way that they can really do that is having spent some time in a Maggie's or in multiple Maggie's centres themselves. And during that sort of selection process, the principal of the practice would engage in conversations with our CEO, who's Laura Lee, who I'm sure if you've seen Andy's webinar, you'll be aware used to be Maggie's cancer nurse and now is our CEO. That senior involvement from some sort of principals, it is expected that carries on throughout the process. And some of the architects that we work with are incredibly big practices, but even then, it's not something we really have to ask of our architects. They tend to want to be involved throughout the process, and there's wonderful footage and images of Norman Foster attending client update meetings, and numerous other famous architects that are involved throughout the entire process. Something when I mentioned then about, I think it's important that the architects actually visit some of the centres. It's probably not a politically correct phrase that I use in Maggie's, but I call it Maggifying. And when even our staff start working for Maggie's, regardless of which department you work in, you go and spend some time working in a centre, and it's a huge privilege to do it, because you get to see how our centre staff do their amazing work, but also you get to spend time with our centre visitors, who are incredible people and incredibly optimistic, and sometimes facing incredible challenges, which when they share their stories with you, you really feel spoilt that you've been allowed to be a part of that. That time in the centre certainly sets you up as a staff member for Maggie's, to understand that the penny drops. You get it. And I think when we do start talking to architects seriously about their involvement in Maggie's, one of the first things that happens is we do invite them to come and see some centres if they haven't already done so themselves. And when we move a little bit further down that process, we invite the key design team members as well. And that's not just the designers, actually from the wider professional team. So approved inspectors, fire consultants, right down to when we're placing contracts, and possibly one of the most important is the contractor themselves and any key subcontractors they have. We tend to have events where we might spend a day visiting a few different centres, and then have a sort of social event afterwards to discuss what their experience was of the centre, and just to really make sure that they get it. This isn't just a high-end development. This is something special. In terms of how long our typical centre would take to deliver, we have a process that we call the gateway process, which is not to be confused with, in the last few years, there's been a planning gateway process for all planning applications. That's something separate. But Maggie's gateway process has a timeline of about 5 years, and that tends to be when we first identify potential sites through to opening. And that's our target. Obviously, with all developments, you end up with challenges along the way that sometimes mean that process has some delays. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer. So this is an image of our Barts Maggie Centre, designed by Stephen Hall Architects, with the landscape done by Darren Hawkes. And when I say the landscape, you probably can't see much landscape there, because this is a very urban location. and there wasn't space for landscape outside the footprint of the building, so it's up on the roof. It's equally as an amazing space as you'd find in a rural location where there's a lot more generous space for landscape. When we start having conversations with the hospital about sites, quite often there'll be a number of sites that are discussed, and by the nature of the fact that there are sites available, they tend to be ones that haven't been suitable for other development. So they are quite often very challenging sites. Quite often they might be in the corner of a car park, or they might be in a space that's not doesn't really lend itself for any more substantial size development. Um, and what we look at a number of things. First of all, it has to be within walking distance from the oncology department. Um, and there isn't a strict threshold of what that has to be, a certain amount of meters, but it's one consideration amongst lots of other ones. So, distance from car park, distance from public transport, accessibility to the site, right down to more typical development type factors, such as what comes out of the soil investigation reports. Is it going to be feasible in terms of cost to do whatever needs to be done to the ground before you can start getting out of the ground? Other things are: is it on a blue light route? And blue light routes means is it on the A&E route for the ambulances coming in? It's quite hard to create a sort of a tranquil space if every few minutes you've got sirens going off outside the front door. Service connections on site, something else that we take into consideration. If we are on one side of the site that's nowhere near a substation and we have to put our own substation in, that can be anything, sort of £250,000 for a substation. So obviously we try and avoid doing that wherever we can. And then there's restrictions in lease, such as covenants and easements, etc. So there's a whole load of different factors that go into selecting sites. Once we do select a site, typically the way that works, although not on every centre, we've got sort of 24 centres at the moment, but not on all of our centres, but on the majority of them, certainly on a lot of the new ones, is that we enter into something like a 30-year lease with the hospital, and we pay a peppercorn rent. So we are very grateful for not having high rent to pay, but Maggie's does fund the entire capital project. So we have to pay for the construction of the centre, and we have to pay for the operation of the centre thereafter. And in terms of what costs they are, we have a maximum cost per square metre that we set at £8,000 a square metre. That includes our landscape costs, our prelims for contractors. If we are in a construction management type arrangement, it includes for the fees for that, and doesn't include architects and other professional fees, but it is our construction cost. And I'm conscious that that's a fairly healthy number, so I'll come back to that a little bit later. In terms of the cost of running a centre a year, it can be circa £500,000, there or thereabouts. And when you realise how many centres we've got and the fact that we're completely charity funded, it's a lot of money that we have to raise to keep the lights on. The purpose of that slide there was really also to explain that our centres should be bold. They should be statement pieces, and they are, by the nature of the way they look, their own wayfinding signage, for want of a better phrase. So you might come out of oncology, and if it's the first time that you're visiting a Maggie's, you might be told to, in this case, go down and look for the beacon that's this white glass building with beautiful coloured squares all over it that looks more like a piece of Mondrian art or something. Sometimes it might be the landscape that is the calling card that tells people where they need to head for. So So the slide that's coming up there, that's our Royal Marsden Centre, designed by Abe Rogers, the landscape by Pierre Dolph. This shows, I think it's a beautiful centre in terms of the approach from the hospital into the centre. And you have this pathway that sort of starts to take your mind perhaps a little bit away from the more sterile environment that you'd found in the hospital and into somewhere that feels much more domestic, albeit a beautiful, residence. But it sort of the pathway should help you um, transfer from that one environment to this much more relaxed environment and something that feels far more domestic or residential in its appearance. It should help sort of help you shake off any anxiety that you might have found that if you've come from either treatment or from an appointment, and help you relax and feel like you're entering somewhere very special. As I mentioned on that previous slide, some of our urban locations don't have the opportunity or benefit of having more wider landscapes that can be sculpted, and they do rely more on rooftop gardens, but they're equally as important. And if you ever get a chance to go and visit Bart's, as I mentioned before, the Darren Hawkes rooftop garden area is absolutely stunning. I'll talk a little bit about biodiversity in one of the following slides. So this is our West London Centre. This is where I did my my induction period. So I've got a close. I'm very fond of this centre. I think it's very close to our London office as well. So I do take every opportunity to pop in and say hello to the team there. It was designed by Richard Rogers. The landscape outside is by Dan Pearson, and once you cross the threshold into a centre, some of the things from an architectural point of view that you won't see that perhaps you might expect to see in a more medical focused environment is that you won't see a reception. There is no reception or receptionist waiting to greet you. There is no signs for toilets, and there's no internal wayfinding or room signage or labeling. And that's our attempt to again make this feel more like a home. You wouldn't typically have a sign on your own toilet at home, or we might, but not typically. And something else that we try and restrict wherever we can is that we don't want the centres to feature lots of fire escape signage. One of the things about our centres are that they're heavily managed, and the staff have got the way they're designed. There's incredible sight lines, so the staff at all times can really see where everybody is. And in the event of needing to evacuate the premises, we rely on our centre staff to manage that process. Things that you will see is when you enter most of our centres, probably the first thing you'll be struck by is the presence of the kitchen table, and that's really the heart of the centre. It's the focal point for gatherings and for support. You will see the sort of visual and acoustic and scent connections to the landscape. West London does that really well. There's a series of light wells that are all heavily planted, and from every space you can look out into one of these spaces. And actually, up on the first floor, there's then I think 4 different terraces up there with beautiful vines and planting up there again that centre visitors and their friends and family can go and occupy. The sight lines, as I mentioned, for the staff are very important. So when the front door opens, it's important that the staff have a sight line to see people coming in. And it should be very clear that everywhere is accessible and inclusive. Where if space weren't an issue, it'd be fantastic if all our centres were on a single story, because that's not always a luxury that we can enjoy. There isn't that much space, and we do have to go up rather than out. We often have lifts. Actually, in West London, we don't have a lift, but what we do is any facilities that are offered upstairs, we make sure they're offered downstairs as well, so nobody misses out. What you won't be asked when you come into a centre, and this might tread a little bit on Andy's presentation before, is nobody will ask you why are you here. They won't ask you if you've got an appointment. You can drop by at Maggie's whenever you want. You don't need an appointment. What you are more likely to hear is, would you like a cup of tea? Would you want a biscuit, some fruit? And if you do want a drink, are you okay making it yourself? And if so, there's the kettle and there are the cups. And you'll be encouraged to go and get stuck in yourself. And that's to try and help instill a sort of sense of control and empower individuals to feel like they are more in control and they're not, in a sort of sterile, more kind of waiting room environment. They're welcome to occupy this space and to enjoy it without being sort of waited on. Having said that, if our visitors do need assistance, then obviously it's there and it's offered. In terms of activities and support groups, there is a notice board that displays that. You might find some of our centre staff might say to visitors, if they feel like they're open to that offering, would they like to have a look at one of those, and let us know if there's any questions. It's that kind of approach. It's very soft. Quite often it's people will take a few visits before they feel like they want to engage, but once they've made their own cup of tea and had a chat with someone else at the kettle, that tends to sort of relax them and they feel much more comfortable engaging. So this is the Royal Free Maggie Centre, opened start of last year, designed by Daniel Libeskind, and the landscapes by Martha Swartz. It's got stunning interiors, as have all the Maggies. They're all very different, but they've all got that in common, that they are quite spectacular. The interiors need to offer be able to satisfy a number of requirements. What you can see there is it's an acoustic curtain, which is a very, very heavy curtain that helps private conversations take place behind it, and also helps stop some of the noise from outside of it getting into that space. And it's a wonderful small space, this, and there are loads of areas within this building that provides very dramatic photos, but I love this area. It's a very small, intimate space where those conversations that are one-to-one need to take place. Equally, that curtain pulls back and opens up into a much larger space. You'll see, if anyone is ever interested to do so, the brief that's on our website, you'll see that there's a list of spaces in terms of these smaller sort of consultation spaces, and then larger spaces that might be for group sessions, be it a cancer support session, or it might be for some of the activities that Francois described in the opening slides for the centres that she was talking about, where it might be yoga. We have drawing classes. We have nutritional classes, classes that show you how to use wigs, and all sorts of things. The staff spaces, some of the very earlier centres where technology at that time, sort of getting on for 20, 30 years ago, didn't allow for the flexibility we enjoy nowadays with Wi-Fi. Some of the older centres do rely a little bit more on fixed locations, less and less so, as time moves on. And certainly the new centres we're designing now, it's expected that staff are quite fluid in the way they move around the building. There are some areas where they might have a printer, or they might have some files that might be a staff area, but with a laptop you'll find staff working all over the centres, and always there to help with a cup of tea or provide visitors with a bit more information if needed. One of the I mentioned before about the kitchen table being the sort of epicenter of our centres, and we typically invite our architects, as well as designing the building, to design the kitchen table, because it is such an integral part of the building, and most of them do that. In terms of the other FF&E, the sort of loose furnishings and the sort of more decorative elements of the building, all of our centres have beautiful artwork in. That's through conversations between our in-house architect, one of my colleagues called Diego, and with our CEO, Laura Lee, and Marcia Blakenham, who's a co-client for Maggie's. And those conversations will take place with the architect, or sometimes if the architect's working with an interior designer. We're currently working with Trisha Guild from Designers Guild on Northampton Centre, and that's with Stephen Marshall Architects. And in terms of the furnishings, it'll be discussions. Every centre's different, is what I guess I'm saying, and it's really tailored to the atmosphere that the building creates. So there isn't a specific set of furnishings that we roll out to every centre. Everyone is different. And in terms of the artwork, we're very fortunate to have been gifted a lot of artwork, but we equally have a lot of artwork on loan, a lot of our centres as well. And some of that gets rotated, and sometimes we have our own art that we move from one place to another as well. So the slide that's just come up on the screen is Yorkshire Maggie's Centre, designed by Thomas Heatherwick, and the landscape designed by Bolston Agui. Maggie's is always talked about in the realms of landscape, and not just the architecture. Obviously, Maggie herself, having been a landscape architect, and the connection with all of these wonderful architects coming from the relationship that Maggie had with many of them, and also with Charles Jenks, Maggie's partner. Hand in hand with the landscape, Maggie's sustainability and well-being ambitions are a document. I've shown a small token corner of the screen there, which is a snapshot of that document, and it's a document that we share with our architects at the start of the design process. It's ambitions, but it's not at any cost. So we have to take everything into consideration, and the most important bottom line is that we have to deliver a beautiful centre that benefits our visitors. But having said that, we do satisfy nearly all of these ambitions anyway, and have been for many years. And if anything, Maggie's always been a little bit ahead on that side of things. I mean, in terms of, if we talk about things like renewables or green energy, in Newcastle, we've just added, as I mentioned, 100 square meters or so to the Ted Cullinan building there, and the roof of that building's got photovoltaic panels on. The original building also had PVs on it. In Northampton, where we're on site, we're using air source heat pumps. We have used ground source heat pumps in the past on centres, where they tend to be the more expensive end of the spectrum when compared to air source or PVs. But sometimes it's applicable, and we're currently looking at that in Bristol for a design there that Muma architects are involved in. We often try and tap into the hospital's district heating network if that's available. And in terms of metered connections, tapping into their electrics and water supply, again, if that saves money with capital outlay, that's always opportunities that we sort of seek out. Water use, so where it's appropriate, we'll try and collect rainwater for use in the landscape. We have flow restrictors on our plumbing, the usual things that you'll see now on lots of new developments, not just Maggie's. We encourage our architects to specify low VOC paints, volatile organic compounds. We often pursue or encourage our structural engineers to use SMCs, which are supplementary cementitious materials in place of Portland cement. So it's a greener kind of concrete that we're suggesting to use. We use breathable renders wherever possible, so products like lime render. I mentioned earlier about biodiversity net gain. So with our landscapes being quite as prominent and as rich as they are, it's something we always do quite well in. And for those that aren't familiar with BNG, biodiversity net gain, it's a measurement that you have to satisfy as part of the planning process, and the national target is a 10% increase. Now, if you're given a car park that's just covered in tarmac and you have to improve the biodiversity, the planting on that car park, it's not that difficult, I would suggest, to achieve 10%. But having said that, we with other sites. So we've got in Kent at the moment a site which is a woody coppice. It's very green site, loads of very mature trees on it already, which Assemble architects are very carefully with J&L Gibbons designed this wonderful centre that sits amongst the mature trees. Now on that one, you've got a high baseline to begin with. And again, the national requirements 10% BNG. The local plan asked for us to try and get 20% if we could. We're actually getting 30%. So even when you start with a high baseline, our landscape always achieves over and above what's required. We've got architects who are looking at reusing existing materials to help with carbon net zero. I mean, it's a different topic entirely, but you could talk for quite an extended period on a lot of the things that are now features in passive house design or biophilic architecture or autonomous architecture. Maggie's have been doing a lot of the elements that feed into those genres for a long time now. So we quite often get asked to speak at sort of biophilic seminars and things like that. And it's not something new we're doing. It's something we've been doing for a while. So this is our extension up in Newcastle that I was talking about, and where there's the corner of the building there in the center of the slide, everything to the left of that is the existing building, everything to the right is our new building. That's clad in Corten, which you can see the panels on the right haven't quite oxidized yet, and they're catching up with the ones on the left, albeit it's hidden behind the text. The landscape here is by Sarah Price. It's an amazing centre. The landscape's incredible. Our landscape architects have got an enormous responsibility, because what's asked of them is to provide environments that stimulate all of our senses from sight, sound, and smell, and encourage wildlife to occupy those spaces, so birds, bees, butterflies, etc. And this is all with the goal of reducing the stress of people that occupy that space and make it a relaxing and an inviting space. All of our gardens have to be gardens for all seasons. So this particular centre, I was on site there in December and January, and it looked just as stunning then as it does. I'm there actually tomorrow, and I know it looks absolutely amazing at the moment. So it's all year round. The gardens have to work hard, equally as hard as the building. A lot of our landscape designers are very, very well known, easily as well known as the architects are in their world. From pretty much all the projects that I've got on my books at the moment are either previous Chelsea Flower Show award winners, or certainly members of the occupation are at the top of their game. Some of them very kindly even donate their Chelsea Flower Show gardens to Maggie's centres. So at Cambridge at the moment, we've got a new centre being designed by Neil McLaughlin, and the landscapes being designed by Tom Stewart Smith. And Tom's award-winning garden from last year's Chelsea Flower Show, he's donated that to us, and it includes an absolutely beautifully crafted small shed structure. That gardening is an important feature in terms of our centre visitors as well as our centre staff. Our centre visitors are very active helping with gardening, so we have little gardening areas for all of them as well. This is, I guess, it's a placeholder really more than anything. So there's all of our centres, although we don't do them for this reason, it certainly doesn't help get it doesn't hurt get the Maggie's name out there. They win a lot of awards. They're either nominated for or shortlisted for things like the Sterling Prize. Several of them have won it. Multiple other very credible worldwide awards. Um, this is the background. There is the Manchester Centre, designed by Norman Foster, with landscape by Dan Pearson. It's an absolutely incredible centre that um, the awards for it are plentiful, but equally we've got some other centres that go on to numerous pages of awards. So it's not unusual to see a lot of recognition for our centres. They are stunning spaces, and as I mentioned earlier, it does come with a cost. And at £8,000 a square metre, it is a healthy budget. I spent many years when I was actively working as an architect, working in high-end residential, which is quite an expensive sector of the market to work in. And on some of those projects, I would love to have had £8,000 a square metre. But having said that, we don't make any apologies for that allocation. The buildings do have to work incredibly hard, and they do have to provide a place of hope for their visitors. They have to be beautiful spaces that are more reminiscent of a domestic space or a space they would love to enjoy visiting. It needs to take their mind off the more clinical environment that sometimes can raise stress levels. And it's not only for those living with cancer that all of these efforts have to support as well. It's for their loved ones, it's for their friends and relatives who often, whilst a visitor might be undergoing treatment in the hospital, their spouse, siblings, friends might come to the centre and just want a little bit of quiet time to themselves to sit and read a book or have a cup of tea or just take a little bit of time out. And I got reminded recently that they're also incredibly um, incredibly important to the actual centre staff, which is something it's quite often easy for me to forget, because I always think about the end users being the visitors. But the centre staff have incredibly challenging jobs that every day they're facing conversations that the rest of us hopefully don't have to have very often, and they do it all day, every day, and creating these wonderful environments for them to work in. It's inspiring for them as well, and helps with the emotional support that they have to provide. So this is a map of, on the left-hand side, where we currently have centres in the UK, sort of mid-20s, we're currently at the moment. We have aspiration to have a centre in each hospital with an oncology department, which is about double what we're at now. So it's close to 60 hospitals. So we've got a lot of work to do. We're hoping by the time we reach 30, which is a year or two away, that we'll have achieved half of that target, and we're on track to do that now. On the right-hand side there, it shows you some of the centres. I'm personally less involved in these, but some of the centres that we've got further afield. So in Barcelona and the Netherlands, in Hong Kong, and in Tokyo. And really that's the presentation. But I just wanted to close with a few slides of current centres that are under construction now. So this is Cheltenham Centre that's been designed by Metropolitan Workshop, and the landscape's going to be by Christine Facer. This is an existing centre. We're adding about another 100 square metres to this centre. This is a centre being designed by Steve Marshall Architects, or Stephen Marshall Urbanism. Arnie Maynard is doing the landscape. This centre is actually nearly complete, and I'd love to show you a photo rather than a rendering, but it's got scaffold all around it, which is currently covering most of the beautiful building. So I thought a rendering would be more appropriate. So This is a centre by Jamie Fober Architects that we secured planning consent for last year. Nigel Dunnett's the landscape architect, and we hope to be soon working on the detailed design for this centre and pressing ahead with the next stages. This is Niall McLaughlin's Cambridge Centre that we're working with Tom Stewart Smith Landscape Design. This was granted planning consent about a month or so ago, and we're currently doing the next stage of detailed design now. And this is Kent Centre, which is designed by Assemble Architects and Jane L. Gibson Landscape Architects. This is in planning now, due to be determined by the end of the month. And I think that's it. There's just a holding slide at the end, really. But thank you very much, and I'd love to help with any questions you may have.
So thank you very much, Jason, for sharing this experience. It really shows the professionalism of Maggie is combined with this humanity. Thank you very much, and thank you for to all the attendees for your attention. Now I invite you to ask all the questions you could have to Jason in using the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. We have already some questions. If we are not able to cover all the questions, we will make the follow-up. So let's start with the first question. So the first question is regarding the sign you mentioned. So so it's a great idea not having this sign inside the centers. However, have you some constraints by regulations, for instance, escape routes or of this kind of signalization?
Yes, we have to work very closely with the fire consultant and with building control, and quite often with the fire brigade themselves, especially when it comes to fire escape signage. As long as we can show that we can provide a managed environment that provides safe escape from the building, thankfully, thus far, the approved inspectors that we've worked with and the fire brigades that we've worked with have been very accommodating. It is a challenge, and it's part of that sort of magnifying process that when we do take our architects and professional team around existing centres, it does take a while for the penny to drop on that one. And it's certainly, I mean, we tend to work as much as we can with the same approved inspector or approved inspectors. We've got a few that we've worked with on numerous centres. So that's very helpful because they've already been through it before, and they completely understand the approach. We do also have a gentleman called Michael Woodrow who works for UCL, who's academic who has previously worked at Norman Foster's office, who now works at UCL, and Michael helps us with our sort of strategic fire strategy across most of our new centres, helps us prepare the conversations, the documents that we need to have with the fire brigade and with approved inspectors. So.
Thank you. So the next question is, are some hospitals nearby youth centers inspired by such architectures, going the same way, at least in some of their area? Do you support them? So what is the relationship with this kind of hospital who would like to, would say, to reproduce the ambience of Maggie's?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's it very much depends on the trust and what funds they've got available. I guess the individual hospitals, and they do vary across the country. In terms of the conversations that we have with them, Yeah, I mean, I know there's a conversation at the moment with Northampton Hospital where they really love what we're proposing to do with the landscape. That was the one that was the rendering that I put up, the CGI rather than a photograph. And they're very keen to have ongoing discussions about improving the landscape across the site. It's been sort of an activity generator that hopefully will go a long way past the boundary of Maggie's centre. So, but yeah, I think some hospitals that have got new campuses and they've got quite exciting architecture, and some of the older ones I'm sure they would love to do something more exciting if they were able to do so.
And what feedback do you receive from oncologists, from healthcare professional?
Yeah, we almost, well, without fail, really positive feedback from oncology. I mean, oncology departments all tend to want Maggie's to join them on site because it helps them enormously. And having that relationship with Maggie's, it both helps them do what they need to do, but also takes some work off them. Quite often, if the oncology department has a very busy day, and they might not have the time to answer the same questions again and again, which is very unfortunate. But when you come into Maggie's, we've got cancer care specialists that work. Many of them come from, in fact, many of our centre heads come from the oncology department of the hospital that we go into. So we have very close relationships with the oncology department, and the same questions can be asked again and again and again. And we never get tired of answering them, and people can take as long as they want. So I think we've got a very good relationship with all the oncology departments.
And what is the first reaction of the people, of the patients, of the visitors when they
When
enters the first time into enters Maggie's?
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, so like all Maggie staff, I've had to act in the capacity of a lot of all of our centres have both volunteer staff and professional staff, and the role that I and my colleagues will have done is similar to one of the volunteer staff, where you're in a centre, and when people come through, you do offer them a cup of tea, and you sort of try and make them feel welcome. And some people are more engaging than others, and some people take a while to warm up. But without fail, everybody thinks the spaces are really really impressive. They feel more relaxed. I think that leads to accelerated time in getting people to open up and to engage. I think if they feel like they're in a very clinical environment, sometimes that they can be a little more guarded. But if they're in an environment that feels more like a domestic space, they feel like they can open up quicker.
We have a questions about the financing. How are the centers financed? Do you receive some contribution from the hospitals? How do you reconcile the budget constraints and the architectural qualities?
Okay, well,
Yeah,
a few
the
questions there.
questions. Yeah.
One, so we're 100% charity funded. We don't receive anything from government or from the hospitals. We do receive enjoy the benefits of paying peppercorn rents, as mentioned earlier. So we have that support from the hospital. Occasionally, we get very generous benefactors who might help with a substantial donation. Sometimes our donations come from individuals who might run the marathon or do bike rides or all manner of things, really. In terms of the running costs of the hospital, as mentioned before, circa sort of £500,000 a year, give or take. It depends on the age and the size of the centre. So when we design a new centre, or we introduce a new centre to a hospital where we haven't had a presence before, we would allow for the centre to be funded for a period of time, typically 2 years. And during that period, we would embed a fundraising team within the centre, and their goals would be to thereafter be self-sufficient in terms of the ongoing cost running of the centre. I can't remember the rest of the question. Sorry, was it to do with the justification?
The hospital responsibilities, but yes, I guess you is the hospital contribute?
No, no, they do offer us that peppercorn rent, but nothing.
Yeah, yeah. Usually they provide the land.
They well, it's a we lease it off them, so it's yes, it's we rent it off them basically for 30 years or whatever the lease arrangement might be.
I have a question regarding what are the main concept that drives your architects when they plan a brand new center?
That was very hard to wrap up in a
Yeah,
quick reply.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean that although there is the tangible rooms sizes that I mentioned that are in the brief, which again can download from our website, it's more them capturing the essence of what the centre needs to do in terms of working hard and creating an environment that makes it so it provides so much benefit for our visitors. So they need to spend time in centres before jumping into designing. The light, the connections to nature, the open plan of the centres. It's it's a combination of multiple things, but
Perfect. And the last one was regarding the center of Cambridge you show us. It looks very big centers. What is do you know the square meters of the center of Cambridge? And the question is also to know if it's what's the constraints to have several floors.
So we at Cambridge we were constrained by a green band of a mature planted TPOs, trees with tree preservation orders on them, which we didn't we couldn't build in that area. Then there was proximity to neighbouring buildings, including right beside us is a children's nursery. And then there's safeguarding issues with not being too close to that boundary because you don't want to have overlooking. So there are all sorts of challenges, the same as you get on any most projects, that be it Maggie's or otherwise. The reason for going up is because there wasn't enough room to satisfy the brief on a single floor. So we did have to go across multiple floors. What Neil McLaughlin's team's done that's quite clever there is they've sort of staggered the floors. Predominantly there's 2 floors, but it sort of goes in half floors as it goes up. There is a lift at that centre. And that was due to the amount of space that we had to work with. Ideally, we wouldn't have lifts because what comes with lifts is maintenance costs that we otherwise not have to spend. But for some centres, it's the only option.
So, and I will close the webinar with the last questions. So, how many people affected by cancers are welcome in average per day in Maggie centers?
It varies from centre to centre, and it's certainly something we've got a lot of data on this, but it's in the hundreds. So it's because again, it's not really just people who are living with cancer themselves. So we welcome friends, relatives. Quite often we'll have people who will bring their children with them, and a lot of our centres, the West London centre that I showed you earlier, has got an area with children's books and a few toys that the children might be able to sit and play whilst conversations that need to happen take place elsewhere in the centre. So yeah, it really varies, and it varies throughout the week as well. You depending on the centre, sometimes you get days that are quieter days, and other days where it's non-stop all day. The kettle's forever boiling. So
Yeah, it's huge.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So thank you very much. So if the attendees have other questions, do not hesitate to contact us. So the webinar is recorded. A replay will be available on our website. So the webinar is coming to an end. So a big thank you for your participation. Thank you, Jason, for your availability and for sharing with us your great experience. So we hope this session has provided you with a better understanding of healing environments and their positive impact on people affected by cancer and on health outcomes. So stay tuned for the next webinars. In October, we will soon send you the topic, so related to comprehensive cancer care centers. See you soon and thank you. Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Thank